Alright, let's talk about the 6 periods which occurred during the Paleozoic era. The first is the Cambrian Period. The Cambrian Period was kind of a neat period because we have a lot of simple eukaryotic organisms like sponges. Sponges just have tissues. And we have more complex ones like trilobites. Trilobites were actually super abundant, and we can find them still in the fossil record. So when we see oceans and primitive oceans, and we can still see trilobites. So that's kind of neat that we have so many of them that we can find them. And they were invertebrates as well. And so we see these small ocean invertebrates that evolved from these sponges, which were just tissues and very soft. And then we go into the Ordovician period, and this is where we have a lot of invertebrates. Our first fish were found during this period, and we start to see land plants. Now remember, in the oceans we had oxygen because we have these cyanobacteria producing oxygen from and removing carbon dioxide out, and they're photosynthetic. But we didn't have a hospitable surface or atmosphere where we had oxygen levels. They were still really low. And so land plants during this period were really super important because they allowed for the evolutionary steps into more advanced organisms living on the Earth's surface, or land masses that were did cellular respiration. So they actually produced the first oxygen. The Silurian period, we see coral first appearing. We still have some of these coral reefs today. Coral is really temperamental. In fact, if you have a 1 degree temperature change with coral, it can actually kill it. And so coral is a very temperamental organism. It's also made of tissues, and it's considered a eukaryotic organism as well. We also see vascular plants start to arise, not only in the oceans but on our land. Now, vascular means that they have a xylem and a phloem, and they're able to move materials into different portions of the cell. They are also very large plants, which was a little different than the first plants that arose on Earth's surface during the Ordovician period, which were very short, not really advanced root systems. These vascular plants had roots, they had stems, they had leaves, so they're what we would consider a modern day plant. Then we go into the Devonian period. The Devonian period is where we have our first seed plants. And so this is huge because now we have sexual reproduction, we have seeds that are forming. These seeds are able to travel over vast distances, usually by air or water. We didn't have insects and pollinators a lot back then. And then we start to see our first lobed fish. And they could breathe air from the surface and from through their gills as well. So that was kind of neat. Now these lobe fish were a little bit different than our first fish that arose, because our first fish are actually jawless fish. These lobe fish look a little bit more like modern day fish than what we had before. So huge advancements during this, because now we have organisms that can breathe the air that's in the atmosphere, not just in the oceans, but in the atmosphere as well. First evolutionary step to allow for our first amphibian and first reptile. So that goes into our next period, the Carnivorous period, which is where we have a huge, massive amounts of plants, left deposits of carbon, which turned into coal. So this is where we start to see swamps, where we have large amounts of plant matter actually dying. We also, however, have two huge evolutionary steps. Those lobe fish started to evolve into amphibians. Now, amphibians can breathe air, but amphibians have to be near a water source because their skin is super thin, and so they're actually taking materials into and out of the water based on their skin. Then soon after that, we had the first reptiles. Reptiles can actually live away from water sources, which is kind of cool. And so they are our first two land organisms, which allowed for then the evolution of bigger reptiles, such as the dinosaurs, which we'll talk about during the Mesozoic era. The Permian period is the last period. This one we had a collision of the continents. And when we had this collision of the continents, we kind of saw a mass extinction occur because they had a lot of volcanic activity. Is one of the reasons that we think it happened, or we had a meteor strike the planet. One of the two. But we know that we had a large mass extinction at the end of this period. This period, though, allowed for the Mesozoic era to occur. The Mesozoic era means middle life. It is also the age of the dinosaurs. It's broken up into three periods: the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous period. Now, the climate on this was a little bit warmer. We had a formation of a supercontinent at the end of the Paleozoic era, and that supercontinent we know as Pangaea. Pangaea was all the continents into one. It was a massive continent, and we had a good climate change for there. So, the Jurassic period was the first period of the dinosaurs. And so this dinosaurs are like a branch of reptiles. We also had huge ferns and conifers, and we had our modern day quail and fish and insects. And so Pangaea was actually, we have a lot of precursors to modern day organisms that we still see on our planet. And then we have the Jurassic period. During the Jurassic period, we have a mass extinction that allowed for the dinosaurs to flourish. We have our first birds to occur during this period, which were branches off of the reptiles. We have small mammals and our first flowering plants. Now, these small mammals are more like rats and voles and moles, are really, really tiny. They don't look like a furry rabbit or something that we would see today and be like, oh, that's so cute. We wouldn't see that. However, the Jurassic period, the dinosaurs or the reptiles during this period were enormous. And that's a good thing and kind of a bad thing. It was cool that we could actually have such large organisms that could survive on our planet's surface and do so well for so long. However, because they were so large, when we had a change in our climate and because they need so much food, when plants started to die off, we saw them quickly erase from the geologic record, and they actually, however, did leave a lot of fossils because they were so predominant. So during the Cretaceous period, this is the peak of the dinosaurs. The continents were very close together. We had a super warm climate. However, we do know that we had a mass extinction at the end of this period, which ended the Mesozoic era. This mass extinction allowed for mammals and birds to become the dominant species during our next era. The problem is because we had a comet or an asteroid collide, we do know that a lot of dust and debris was put up into the atmosphere. We had a massive amount of plants die, all of our large dinosaurs died, and they were covered up with this sediment very quickly. Because they were covered up with sediment very quickly, it allowed for us to get a great fossil record of these organisms, and that's how we know so many of them existed and where they're actually located at. Without this covering, we wouldn't see these fossils actually occur. Then we go into modern era, and that's the Cenozoic era. We are currently in the Cenozoic era. The Cenozoic era really has two periods. One is the Tertiary period and the other is the Quaternary. We're currently in the Quaternary period. So, we know this. This is the age of mammals. So, the Tertiary period, the Earth's climate was generally warm, a little humid. Our mammals started to fully find out what their niche was going to be because these large dinosaurs had taken over everything. And so now that this, there were no dinosaurs, we could actually see these mammals starting getting bigger and bigger. They were actually able to find food sources a lot easier. And we had our first primates evolve. These primates gave a common ancestor to modern day humans. However, just remember that primates is a generalized term. It does not mean monkey. So, also we had flowering plants during this time period. Huge evolutionary advancement for plants because they actually evolved to go with insects as polymers. Then we have the Quaternary Period. We're currently in that stage of our geologic time scale right now. We are starting to see the Earth's climate cool just a little bit, and we're starting to see it gradually warm up. During where we're at, our sea levels have fallen when we had the glaciers and with the extinction of like the mammoths, things like that. However, we're starting to see the glaciers are starting to melt during this time period currently. We're starting to see a lot of our ocean levels are increasing. We're starting to see more tectonic plate movement and volcanic activity as we go forth into this time period. And we know that the last ice age was about 12,000 years ago, and we're quickly facing another one, which becomes a little bit of a problem. The KQLD is the last ice age. And so when we think about this last ice age, this is where we had our mammoths. This is where we had our ice bridge between Russia and Alaska, allowing for the migration of modern Homo sapiens onto North America. We also saw that there was a huge change in the wildlife during this last ice age, which was a good thing and a bad thing. It allowed for modern organisms such as us to be able to populate and expand, and we also saw a rise in there. And so with this, we have a great advancement. Now remember, as we're starting to go through the Quaternary Period, we're starting to see a general warming. We're starting to see carbon dioxide levels rise, and we know this. Whenever carbon dioxide levels have risen, we have a correlation with a giant mass extinction and an ice age. So we are heading towards that stage. We didn't predict it to happen as quickly as it is, but because of our warming of our planet, we are starting to see that. And so we are going to watch a video next week that's going to talk a little bit about the extinction that we're going to and why we're kind of getting to that extinction point and how humans, our species, have kind of not started the process but kind of sped it up a little bit. Okay, I hope you guys have a great weekend, and we'll continue this next week.